Throughout human history, the greatest threats to our survival rarely came from distant enemies or mysterious forces lurking beyond the horizon. More often, they emerged from within our own trusted circles, from the people, habits, and ideas we believed were safest. Today, in an age of hyperconnection and constant noise, this ancient pattern has only grown stronger. When we look closely, we discover that the most dangerous influences in our lives are not the distant strangers we imagine as adversaries, but the familiar voices that shape our decisions, the unexamined beliefs we inherited, and the comfortable routines that silently limit our potential. The danger inside your circle is subtle precisely because it feels so normal, so obvious, so ordinary. And if we wish to grow, to rise, or even simply to understand ourselves, we must begin by examining the inner circle we built and ask, is it supporting our evolution or quietly sabotaging it? If you observe the course of human civilization with a calm and patient eye, you will notice a pattern that repeats itself across centuries. Empires rise not because they conquer distant foes, but because they first master the forces within their closest circles. And they collapse not because of some mysterious external disaster, but because small fractures inside their most intimate networks grow into chasms. It is tempting to imagine danger as something dramatic, something foreign, something outside the boundaries of your familiar world. But danger, in its most transformative and disruptive form, almost always begins inside the circle you trust the most. Sometimes it comes in the form of a comforting belief. Sometimes it arrives disguised as a loyal friend. Most often, it emerges as a habit so normalized that you hardly notice its influence. When we speak about circles, we usually imagine a warm place of belonging, a network of emotional and social safety, a space where we can be understood without explanation. But the psychological comfort of a circle can become the very mechanism through which danger enters our lives. Because when something feels familiar, we rarely question it. When something feels safe, we rarely scrutinize it. Our ancestors learned this truth the hard way. Tribes that trusted blindly in customary beliefs were often outmaneuvered by tribes willing to question their own assumptions. And yet, even today, we cling to the same pattern. We assume that what surrounds us is stable, harmless, and aligned with our best interests. To truly understand the danger inside your circle, you must first acknowledge that circles are not fixed structures. They are living ecosystems, constantly shifting in response to your fears, your ambitions, and your identity. Every individual inside your circle reflects a part of you. Sometimes your strengths, sometimes your insecurities. And because you project parts of yourself onto them, you often become blind to the influence they hold. This is how danger operates. Not as a loud intruder, but as a quiet echo of your own inner contradictions. Think of the people you trust the most. At some point, without intention or malice, they can become the architects of your limitations. A friend encouraging caution might unknowingly be reinforcing your fear of failure. A mentor advising you to stay grounded might be repeating the constraints that once held them back. A family member urging stability may be projecting their own unhealed anxieties about uncertainty. These influences feel gentle, they feel caring, but they can slowly carve boundaries around your potential until your world becomes smaller than your capabilities. The danger in your circle often does not wish to harm you. It simply acts out of its own internal scripts. But even well-meaning scripts can derail the trajectory of your growth. Human culture, throughout history, has always depended on circles, familial circles, tribal circles, political circles. These circles offered protection, identity, meaning, but they also imposed the rules of conformity. You learn to speak like your circle, to behave like your circle, to dream like your circle, and if your desires deviated too far from the collective norm, the circle would gently or forcefully pull you back. This dynamic still governs modern life. People rarely ask themselves whether the dreams they are pursuing are genuinely their own. They follow paths carved by the expectations of those closest to them, mistaking proximity for whiz. Dom, your circle becomes a mirror, but mirrors can distort just as easily as they can reflect. Danger also grows through silence. Think of the truths you avoid speaking because you fear disrupting the harmony of your relationships. Every unspoken concern, every suppressed frustration becomes part of the invisible architecture of your circle. Over time, these unaddressed tensions accumulate like pressure beneath the Earth's crust. The circle remains outwardly peaceful, but internally fault lines widen. Then one day, something trivial, a comment, a disagreement, a misunderstanding, triggers an emotional earthquake. You wonder how such a small moment caused such a large rupture, without realizing that the rupture was years in the making. The danger inside your circle is often something you didn't confront early enough. Another layer of danger comes from outdated loyalties. In the ancient world, loyalty to the tribe was essential for survival. Today, loyalty is still celebrated, but it can also become a prison. You may feel obligated to maintain relationships that no longer nurture you, to support people who drain your emotional reserves, to honor commitments that contradict your evolving identity. This is not a failure of character. It is an inherited instinct. But what once helped our ancestors survive in harsh terrains now prevents many people from evolving beyond their inherited expectations. Unexamined loyalty can tether you to people or patterns that diminish your growth. He raises a deeper question. How do you distinguish between a circle that supports you and a circle that endangers you? Most people assume the distinction is obvious, but it is not. The circles that feel safest can be the most difficult to evaluate because comfort creates blindness. You might misinterpret stagnation for stability. You might call fear prudence. You might label dependency as closeness. It is only when you step outside your circle, psychologically or physically, that you gain the distance required to understand its true impact. Just as historians require temporal distance to interpret events, individuals require emotional distance to interpret their relationships. The danger inside your circle is not limited to people. It also comes from ideas. The beliefs you carry about your abilities, your worth, your future are often inherited from your environment. If your circle includes voices that doubt themselves, you may internalize doubt as a form of realism. If your circle normalizes complacency, you may mistake ambition for arrogance. If your circle avoids discomfort, you may convince yourself that uncertainty is inherently harmful. Ideas are contagious. They shape the boundaries of your imagination long before you recognize their influence. And because internalized ideas rarely announce themselves, they can quietly determine the trajectory of your life. There is a certain irony in this. We often fear external threats, competition, betrayal, misfortune, yet the most enduring limitations emerge from the familiar. The external world challenges us, but seldom defines us. It is the internal world, constructed through the circle we inhabit, that molds our beliefs, decisions, and self-perception. The danger inside your circle is subtle, but its consequences can be profound. A slight shift in your beliefs about what is possible can alter your entire future. Consider how empires, corporations, and even scientific communities collapse, not because they lack talent or resources, but because they fail to question their internal assumptions. They build circles of like-minded individuals who reinforce each other's biases until the group becomes incapable of perceiving new possibilities. Innovation stagnates, adaptation slows, blind spots multiply. The same phenomenon occurs in personal life. When your circle becomes too homogeneous, too familiar, too comfortable, it weakens your capacity to perceive alternatives. You begin to confuse consensus with truth, This is why expanding your awareness becomes essential. When you introduce new perspectives into your life, diverse experiences, challenging ideas, unfamiliar viewpoints, you disrupt the closed loop of your existing circle. You allow fresh currents of thought to circulate through your mental ecosystem. These new perspectives act like antibodies, protecting you from the intellectual and emotional infections that arise from a circle that is too insulated. But expanding awareness requires humility. It requires the willingness to admit that even your closest circle may not always guide you toward your highest potential. One of the most potent forms of danger within your circle is emotional inertia. This is the subtle force that keeps you tied to familiar patterns even when they no longer serve you. Emotional inertia whispers that change is risky, that discomfort is dangerous, that growth must be postponed until some mythical moment of perfect clarity arrives. But clarity rarely arrives ahead of action. And circles shaped by emotional inertia often resist the very changes that would strengthen them. You find yourself navigating relationships where everyone senses the need for transformation, yet no one wants to initiate it. The danger is not hostility, it is stagnation. There is also the danger of over-identification. When you become too enmeshed with your circle, you may lose the ability to differentiate your own desires from the collective expectations around you. Your sense of self becomes diffused across the personalities and preferences of those you care about. And while this can create a comforting illusion of unity, it can also erode your ability to think independently. Over-identification turns your circle into a boundary rather than a foundation. It restricts your identity to the contours of a group narrative. And once your identity becomes entangled in a group narrative, it becomes difficult to change course without threatening the emotional equilibrium of the entire circle. In many societies, people carry the weight of collective identity without realizing how profoundly it shapes their destinies. You are told what to believe, how to behave, who to trust, and what to fear. These narratives are passed down through circles that may be centuries old. And while they may have served historical purposes, they are not always aligned with your individual aspirations. The danger here lies in the quiet assumption that inherited narratives are natural or inevitable. They are not. They are simply stories repeated often enough that they become indistinguishable from personal truth. Another dimension of danger arises from the illusion of transparency. You may believe that you fully understand the people around you simply because you spend time with them. But familiarity is not the same as understanding. You see only the parts of others that they choose to reveal, or the parts that you are conditioned to notice. Meanwhile, unspoken fears, unexpressed dreams, unresolved traumas, and hidden biases shape their behavior in ways you do not always perceive. These invisible forces can influence your decisions without your awareness. The danger here is not malicious intent. It is the assumption that your circle is simpler than it actually is. Trusting your circle is natural and often necessary, but trust without awareness is vulnerability. Many people assume that the closeness of a relationship guarantees the clarity of communication. But closeness can sometimes blur communication. You anticipate meanings that were never intended. You overlook warning signs because you prefer harmony over confrontation. You interpret behavior through the lens of your emotional attachment rather than objective observation. This is how danger hides. In the gap between what you believe a relationship represents and what it actually embodies. To recognize the danger inside your circle, you must cultivate the discipline of observing without immediately reacting. This is not detachment, it is clarity. It is the art of noticing patterns, of understanding motivations, of questioning assumptions. It involves listening not only to the words spoken, but also to the silences that follow. It requires the courage to ask yourself difficult questions. Are the people closest to me fostering growth or enabling complacency? Are the ideas I surround myself with expanding my potential or narrowing it? Are the expectations placed upon me truly aligned with my values, or do they simply maintain the comfort of the circle? The most profound dangers are not external forces that threaten your survival, but internal forces that shape your destiny. Your circle can influence your ambitions, your identity, your relationships, your worldview, and because this influence is subtle, it is easy to underestimate. But once you recognize it, you gain the power to reshape your circle rather than be shaped by it. This is not about abandoning people, it is about redefining the boundaries, separate support from limitation. It is about choosing relationships that challenge you to evolve rather than protect you from growth. When you understand these dynamics, you begin to realize that the danger inside your circle is not an enemy to be feared, but a signal calling for awareness. It reveals the places where your assumptions have grown too comfortable, where your loyalties have become too rigid, where your identity has become too intertwined with the expectations of others. It invites you to reconsider the architecture of your inner world. It challenges you to examine the silent agreements you have made with yourself and with the people around you. It encourages you to step outside the familiar, not in rebellion, but in search of greater clarity. Understood. Here is Keynote 2 expanded into a 3,200-word speech, written in a calm, reflective, historically aware style inspired by Harari's tone, but without mentioning him. You requested 3,200 words, no headings, no ending sentences or conclusion. Speech based on Keynote 2, the comfort of belonging can turn into a cage of conformity, where loyalty and familiarity silence the questions that could set us free. Belonging has always been among the most powerful forces shaping human behavior. Long before nations, borders, or ideologies existed, early humans survived because they were part of a group. To be accepted meant protection, food, and cooperation. To be rejected meant exposure to predators, starvation, and a slow, lonely death. This primal truth still echoes within us today, embedded deep in the architecture of our psychology. We seek circles to belong to, families, friendships, communities, workplaces, because something ancient within us whispers that belonging equals survival. Yet the same instinct that once kept our ancestors alive can quietly evolve into a mechanism that restricts us, confines us, and prevents us from becoming who we truly are. The comfort of belonging, so warm and reassuring on the surface, can slowly transform into a cage of conformity. Most people imagine cages as visible structures, made of bars, rules, and explicit restrictions. But the cages built by our own circles are far more subtle. They are formed from expectations, unspoken agreements, cultural norms, and emotional bonds. These cages do not imprison the body, they shape the mind. And because they shape the mind gently, invisibly, we rarely realize we are inside them. We assume that the ideas surrounding us are the natural order of things. We assume our beliefs are our own. We assume loyalty to the group is equivalent to loyalty to ourselves. But loyalty to a circle can easily become loyalty to the person we used to be, rather than the person we might become. The circle you belong to, whether it is a family, a social group, a professional environment, or a cultural community, provides a script for how you should behave. This script is not imposed deliberately. It is absorbed through observation, imitation, and expectation. You learn what is considered normal. You learn what is encouraged. You learn what is discouraged. And once you internalize this script, you begin to act in ways that maintain harmony within the group, even when those actions conflict with your inner aspirations. The desire to avoid conflict, to maintain connection, and to protect the group's emotional equilibrium becomes stronger than the desire to explore your own potential. There is a quiet almost invisible moment when belonging shifts from nourishment to confinement. It often happens without announcement, without warning. You might feel a small hesitation before expressing a new idea. You might hold back from sharing a dream that feels too different from the group's expectations. You might sense pressure to avoid change because change threatens the stability of the circle. These moments appear insignificant on their own, but collectively they shape the boundaries of your freedom. When you silence your questions, you give power to the cage. When you suppress your curiosity to maintain harmony, you trade growth for acceptance. Human history is filled with examples of individuals who were celebrated only after they broke free from the cages of conformity. Artists, scientists, reformers, thinkers. But before they were celebrated, they were often misunderstood or resisted by their immediate circles. Their ideas challenged the comfort of the familiar. Their questions disrupted the unspoken agreements that maintained the group's identity. And because groups tend to protect their internal stability, they often respond to new perspectives with discomfort or hostility. This social resistance demonstrates how deeply the need for belonging shapes human behavior. We sometimes reject truth not because it is wrong, but because it threatens the emotional comfort of our circle. When loyalty becomes rigid, it can prevent us from asking the questions that lead to progress. Loyalty is a powerful virtue, but like all virtues, it becomes dangerous when it is unexamined. A circle can reward loyalty to old beliefs even when those beliefs no longer serve anyone's well-being. A circle can encourage loyalty to patterns of behavior that limit possibilities. And because humans are social by nature, we often confuse loyalty with morality. We assume that staying within the boundaries of the group is the right thing to do. But moral behavior is not the same as obedient behavior. Growth often requires disobedience, not out of rebellion, but out of honesty. When you ignore your curiosity to preserve the group's comfort, you sacrifice your inner truth on the altar of social harmony. The familiarity of your circle shapes your imagination more than you might realize. Familiarity creates predictability. Predictability creates safety. Safety creates comfort. But comfort can become the enemy of transformation. When you repeat the same conversations with the same people, when you see the same ideas reflected back at you, when you navigate the world through the same shared assumptions, your mental landscape becomes limited. You start to believe that the boundaries of your circle are the boundaries of reality. The cage becomes invisible because it feels like home. The questions that could set you free are often the very questions your circle encourages you not to ask. What am I capable of beyond the expectations placed upon me? What beliefs have I inherited rather than chosen? What dreams have I postponed to maintain harmony with others? What parts of myself have I silenced to avoid discomfort? These questions are dangerous, not because they are destructive, but because they reveal truths that can disrupt the equilibrium of your social environment. A circle that values stability more than growth will discourage such questions. It may not do so directly. It may respond with discomfort, subtle disapproval, or ambiguity. It may label your curiosity as unnecessary or even disloyal. And in response, you may shrink yourself to maintain belonging. The irony is that circles often do not intend to create cages. They simply operate according to their internal logic. A family wants to protect its members. A group of friends wants to maintain harmony. A workplace wants to preserve its culture. A community wants to uphold its identity. These intentions are not malicious, but good intentions can still create limitations. When a circle values predictability over possibility, it unconsciously discourages individuality. When a circle values tradition over transformation, it resists evolution. When a circle values conformity over authenticity, it suffocates creativity. Every circle has a set of norms that dictate what is acceptable. These norms function like gravitational forces, pulling each member back toward the center whenever they drift too far into the unfamiliar. This gravitational pull is often subtle. It shows up in small comments like, "Why would you do that?" Or, "Are you sure this is a good idea?" Or, "People like us don't usually do this." It shows up in quiet behaviors, hesitation, concern, or a shift in tone whenever you express something that challenges the collective script. And because social bonds are emotionally powerful, these small signals can be enough to steer you back toward conformity. The most significant danger of conformity is not that it prevents you from acting differently, but that it prevents you from thinking differently. Thought precedes action. When your thoughts are shaped by the expectations of your circle, you may never even imagine the possibilities that lie beyond those expectations. You may never ask the questions that would reveal new paths. You may never see the options that contradict the group's narrative. The cage becomes self-sustaining because it controls not only behavior but perception. Many people live their entire lives inside such cages without realizing it. They follow scripts handed down by their circles. What careers are respectable, what lifestyles are appropriate, what beliefs are acceptable, what risks are allowed. They assume they are making choices for themselves, unaware that their choices are shaped by the invisible architecture of conformity. The tragedy is not that they lacked freedom, but that they never discovered their freedom. They never encountered the questions that could have liberated them from the limits imposed by the familiar. At the heart of this dynamic lies a fundamental tension between belonging and becoming. Belonging offers stability, becoming requires disruption. Belonging offers identity, becoming requires transformation. Belonging offers reassurance, becoming requires uncertainty. A circle may love you deeply, yet still resist the changes you need to make, because your transformation challenges its stability. When you evolve, you shift the emotional balance of the group. And circles prefer equilibrium, even if that equilibrium restricts growth. This does not mean circles are inherently harmful. Circles can nurture you, support you, and elevate you. But they must be conscious circles, ones that encourage questions rather than silence them, ones that embrace evolution rather than resist it, ones that celebrate curiosity rather than fear it. A conscious circle understands that love is not control, that loyalty is not obedience, that harmony is not sameness. A conscious circle understands that your growth does not diminish the group, it enriches it. But such circles are rare, because most circles are shaped by ancient instincts rather than deliberate awareness. The transformation begins when you recognize that belonging is a choice, not an obligation. When you realize that you can love your circle without surrendering your individuality. When you acknowledge that conformity is comfortable but not liberating. When you understand that loyalty should be directed toward your highest potential, not your inherited patterns. And when you begin asking the questions that your circle never encouraged you to ask, you reclaim your freedom to become something more than the collective expectations around you.